Welcome to another segment of Under 5. My name is Lisa Brown, Equity and Civil Rights Program Manager at ODOT. Today we're going to talk about trauma in the workplace. This video aims to explore what a trauma-informed workplace is and the practices we can implement to support one. Before considering how we can be trauma-informed, we must understand what trauma is and what it does to the brain. When one-time or recurring events happen to us that are distressful or disturbing, our brains log that experience as a threat to our safety or well-being. It can create significant and lasting mental, physical, and emotional harm. The impact of that harm shows up in our everyday lives. Even when we find ways to adapt, we can still experience long-term psychological, emotional, and physical responses. That includes prior trauma being triggered in unexpected ways. So let's talk a bit about the science behind those experiences and why they continue to impact us. Some of you may have heard of the term fight, flight, freeze, or fawn brain responses. When we experience trauma, our brain connects perceived threats and extreme survival responses. A sight, sound, smell, touch, or taste can trigger a trauma response long after the traumatic event. Our five senses can trigger trauma responses because they are transmitted through our senses and connected to the lower area of our brains known as the brainstem. Our trauma can be triggered when our brainstem perceives a threat to our safety or well-being. Because our brainstem uses our five senses to take in information during traumatic events, they also can be triggered even when there is no real threat to our safety or well-being. The information our senses send to our brainstem can only be matched against previously stored memories. This is sometimes why you hear that a person's trauma can be triggered by a smell, image, or other sensory information. Since our brainstem cannot think, invent, create, tell time, past or present, or use language, our senses can pull us from the moment we are in back to moments of past trauma. When it sends us into a trauma response, we go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. The fight response is anger or aggression. Flight response is fleeing the scene. Freeze response is being unable to take action, or fawn response is avoiding or diffusing conflict. So while it is very useful in emergency situations when our brain perceives emergency level threats incorrectly, it is impossible to operate using our part of the brain that allows us to think, invent, create, tell time, and use language, because all of that is controlled by the part of our brain that we are unable to access when trauma is triggered. Considering this information, let's think about the different kinds of existing trauma that can be experienced or triggered in the workplace. At ODOT, some of our employees are the first to arrive on the scene of an accident. They see people in difficult medical situations or suicide attempts resulting in fatalities. These incidents stick with them forever. There are employees who might notice signs of human trafficking or see other forms of abuse or harm in our public-facing offices. There are employees who regularly experience microaggressions on their teams or in their interactions with the public. Also, our employees may be dealing with experiences that have happened outside the workplace but are triggered there. Trauma is often related to witnessing or personally experiencing abuse, bullying, serious medical conditions, exposure to serious injuries or death, and loss of loved ones. It can also stem from the way others perceive and treat us based on ability, age, gender, race or ethnicity, geographic location, economic status, English language proficiency, citizenship status, and more. Now that we know about the science behind trauma, let's explore how we can define and become more trauma-informed. A trauma-informed workplace is an organizational structure that acknowledges the prevalence and impact of trauma on individuals. Trauma-informed workplaces acknowledge that because our different life experiences, we experience the workplace differently. Understanding our interactions with people can trigger traumatic experiences or create new ones is a part of being trauma-informed. By recognizing the impact of trauma on individuals and understanding its effect on both our personal and professional lives, we aim to create an environment where everyone feels secure and supported. Feeling secure and supported relies upon us also prioritizing physical and psychological safety for our employees. Here are some practices we can do to support one another. Be mindful of diversity and cultural differences. Not everyone experiences or responds to trauma the same. We can use inclusive language to minimize potential triggers. Together, we can work to communicate with clarity and resolve conflict with sensitivity. Share resources to support employees who may have experienced trauma. like our ODOT peer support team that provides support for employees to help deal with traumatic incidents at work. Access our Employee Assistance Program, which offers a variety of confidential services to support employees, or participate in employee resource groups where we encourage a supportive and compassionate work culture, where employees can also find comfort and understanding from their colleagues. These are just some of the ways we can help ODOT become a more trauma-informed workplace. In the next 7 days, think about the trainings you and your team want to implement to be supportive of each other.